Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. All right, well, welcome to another episode of another Cloud Podcast. Today, we are excited to have Justin Strackany. He is the Chief Customer Officer over at SecureLink. Justin, welcome to the show. Good to have you on.
Great to be here.
Good to have you. And Artie, my co-host and pilot and co-pilot partner in crime. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, great to be on the show. Looking forward to this one. I'll kick it off, Justin. I'll ask just a little bit about you and your background. So where do you work today? What do you do? And what does your company do?
So I am the Chief Customer Officer at SecureLink. We were founded in 2003, based in Austin, Texas. And originally, we were really designed to kind of do one thing, which is help third parties connect more securely to their customers. And then those customers more securely manage and audit those vendors. We've sort of expanded that into a broader concept of critical access management. So that might include patient privacy or governance or, threat detection, any of the access that's most critical to your network, which of course is going to cover third parties and other threat vectors, is what we're a platform designed to manage.
Yeah, IT security and just security in general, when we talk to IT executives, that's number one on the list of what's most important to you this year, next year. Security is always at the top.
Yeah, there are always, these operational things that, of course, IT executives have to deal with, but security is the only thing that can land you on the front page of the USA Today or something in a bad way. And so that's to the degree you're managing up to a CEO, that's like the one thing you want to avoid.
Yeah, there's no Hall of Fame for you did a good job. It's the walk kind of shame for the bad job.
It's a zero-sum game at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit about just your career path. I mean, how you ended up in the C-level, where you got started, and how that kind of transitioned over your course of your career. I know you've worn a lot of hats, and just how the evolution took place for you.
Yeah, so it was very happenstance. I started my career in IT sales, working for CDW, and this was we were the first division that wasn't just inbound. So I had a $0 book of business and had to make outbound calls to generate anything. So that, as anybody who's in a VP of sales or any kind of sales role, that's like the best way to cut your teeth if you want to have transferable skills in any kind of revenue role. So from there, I had a little kind of my lost years where I sang on cruise ships and bartended for a little bit, which culminated in me moving to Austin, Texas, and getting back on the cold calling. I had been a bartender, so I wasn't like coming right in from this, thrilling, marketable IT sales position. So I went right into making, 80, 100 calls a day, and answered an ad to be employee number one with two founders of this software company called SecureLink. And, I must have seemed smarter or more ambitious than my previous roles would have originally led them to believe. So they ended up hiring me to kind of be the generalist, kind of junior sales guy, inside sales. They didn't have the concept of sales development back then, but I started just doing cold calls and trying to set up meetings for the founder. And one of the things that has been both good and maybe bad in my role is I get bored easily. And I kind of figure something out, and then I'm like, all right, that's cool. I should probably do something else. If it gets to that stage where I need to just manage iteratively the results, I start getting anxious. So I thought it'd probably be a good idea for me to learn how to do the sales demos. And then it'd probably be a good idea for me to learn how to install the servers. And then maybe if I learned how to manage the database and learn some Linux, that might be interesting. And that sort of led me for quite a while outside of sales into sales engineering. And then I was kind of your SE CSM generalist for a while. So I did your demo and I would be the only guy you talked to at SecureLink unless you had a really hard technical problem. And I did that in some way, shape, or form for probably 7-8 years. One thing that's interesting about SecureLink, which is in one, me being there for as long as I have been is very rare, but also we were entirely bootstrapped for most of our life cycle as a company. So no, I didn't even know. I'd have people ask me, so are you guys Series A or Series B? I didn't even know what that meant because we got a very small round of just individual angel investors, and that was it. So as a result, we grew very slowly. We probably didn't hit $1 million in recurring revenue until 4 years in. And then we're growing 20% from there, which show, that's 1.2, 1.5 and things. So we were 4 people and then 6. And when we had enough money, we would hire another one and just kind of grow very linearly from there. So this was kind of our phase until 2012, when I got an opportunity to take over sales. And I had, this long list, 6 years of things I wish we had done as, more senior VP of sales would come in and run their playbook. And I would think that's not going to work here with this very specific product and this very specific buyer set who I know just like the back of my hand. So when I got my shot, if you will, I had a lot of ideas, and luckily they were able to pay off. And we had some really good lucky hires, and we went from about 2 million to 12 million from 2013 to 2017. So it was really, I think, from going to this generalist individual contributor. By 2017, I think I was chief customer officer at that stage. It was really total luck in many ways, right place, right time, right environment. The Target breach happened right around then, which had some interest, but also was betting on myself and taking some high risk moves that ended up paying off and saying, look, don't pay me anything. Don't give me a promotion. But if I nail this, what would success look like for you? And they might say 50%. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, if I doubled it, that'd be amazing, right? And you would, reward me with, some new title or something like that. Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Nobody would have ever thought that I would have actually accomplished it. So, Jan 1, they were willing to agree to lots of things that in hindsight didn't seem like as good of an idea at the time. So all that to say that I was able to kind of ride these large increases then as the company got a lot bigger and was forced to mature pretty quickly in 2017. And from there, we kind of entered the next phase. We were acquired by Vista and entered the PE world. So it's been really cool. We're now on our second acquisition to now get a sense of, all right, I was on this very ancient sounding bootstrap playbook for a while that many people don't get to experience. Well, how do VC and PE funds that run this other thing approach growth? And so having the marriage of those two has been a really cool experience.
What a great origin story. I love hearing, employee number 1 still at the company. You've been there for 17 years. You've seen it grow from a startup to what it is today. And you also, and this is pretty rare, you went to each department and you oversaw each function to kind of learn and absorb that information. What towards the end, or towards the last year or two, or maybe 4 or 5 years, what drew you towards focusing on the customer? The chief customer officer role is really to focus on the over. What drew you to that and like centered you again? And then what's your mindset today as you go towards the future?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I love talking to customers. I love going to see them. I like asking the perfect question that yields some insight or some growth lever or some new contact. It's, there's a mystery there, but there's also, it's very rewarding to develop these long-standing relationships. And while sales is great, there's that kind of feeds more of that competitive streak and, that desire to win and compete. You don't really get to form these really long-standing mutual relationships. I mean, some of these guys and gals that have been customers I've known for 15 years now. So, there's just these deep relationships, and that's really been really gratifying. And I think, to be honest, being the CRO or VP of sales at a PE-backed company, it's a tough gig. There's a lot of expectations there. You may not control your number. Your number may not be realistic. You might be tasked with, an investment prospectus that the reality doesn't line up to. So I think I can control my destiny a little better on the customer end. And but I still like, and I kind of believe there are two camps of CS executives. There's revenue oriented and there's service oriented. And not to disparage either camp, but I definitely, coming from years in sales, take a revenue minded approach, focus on net recurring revenue over NPS. And realize, my job is to increase that multiple and add to the valuation of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that too when we've talked to other executives on, kind of finding out what there's a struggle with the different business units in a lot of companies. Where is it? Are we trying to grow revenue, retention? Is it about, the service and whatnot? And so a lot of it can get convoluted, and there has to be a North Star. The good part is you're the chief customer officer, so you can be that North Star for the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
About the tactical versus strategy, as you took this role and started to expand on the next steps and hitting these goals that you're tasked with from the PE perspective.
Yeah, I think tactically right now we're trying to scale, which means and we're also trying to go up market a little bit and have a higher ASP and more enterprise customers. So that means stratifying our CS staff and account managers a little bit and embracing maybe more of that true account manager function on the CS side, and also leveraging technology to be able to reach more customers across different tiers. I'm really excited about the role of AI in customer success. I think this idea of a customer intelligence platform is going to be a game changer over the next couple years, because there's so much information right now. And there's all these little canaries in the coal mine and these micro interactions that you don't know what's important without somebody combing through it for trends or sentiment and things like that.
Yeah, I want to drill into that in a little bit here, the technology and AI. But before that, you mentioned something that's really near and dear to my heart. As a company grows, you may need that stratosphere of account managers or tiers. Not necessarily tiers because they're not going through one to the other, but really you have a higher specialty. Talk to us about if you haven't done it yet, what is your plan to do it, and what's your strategy? And then if you have done it, what were the keys to success by separating the team or separating them into different levels.
Yeah, and I would say we are doing it and maybe aren't on the other side of that bridge yet. But I think the important things we're trying to keep in mind, just like the customer success manager, they have so many hats, right? Like at any point in time, they might have to be your subject matter expert. They're this lead empath for the customer. They're supposed to keep the product roadmap in mind. Now they're supposed to like rip off their Scooby-Doo mask and suddenly they're a salesperson handling the renewal at certain organizations. And it's really tough. And then they have to be super organized and kind of pseudo manage the project and the rollout as well. And there just isn't a CSM that can be, this unicorn that can do all of those things. And so after you get past maybe 1 million to 2 million in ARR, I think it's important. Your CSMs are going to self-select. There's going to be the organized ones who end up just managing the project really well. There's going to be the more sales-oriented ones who are always find themselves around the money somehow. And then there's the ones who just do a really good job of developing relationships. And so all this to say, I think there's an archetype for your enterprise customer success manager. They don't get in the weeds tactically too much. They understand what's important. And they understand it's a path and it's about a success plan. So what I like to see, or what I like to coach for, is have a clear understanding of success criteria and the ROI of the solution, and then manage the rollout. Maybe it's a multi-year success plan to that shared mutual accountability. Hold yourself accountable, hold the customer accountable. And if you do that, the renewals and the growth and everything else kind of takes care of itself. So it's not this sales oriented where you're geared around this close. And it's not really this subject matter expert where you are aligned with the champion for product fit. It's somewhere higher, but again, it's, the person who can think in those terms may not be a great customer success manager for an SMB solution, or even for any company up to a certain ARR value.
Yeah. I think a lot of our viewers have that same difficulty understanding. Do you do it off of lifetime value of the customer, or what their reoccurring value is, or do you do it based off of how expansive their product need is or support need is? They might need support across multiple different areas of their business, but they may be really small. So throwing a valuable resource or a CSM or account manager at them could be very costly for the support organization, versus giving them maybe someone who's a little bit more junior that can grow into that product knowledge across different platforms. And Alex and I were talking to someone on the previous episode where we were talking a little bit about the complexity of that. So great to hear some insight there.
Yeah, when you talk about multi-product, I mean, the cool thing about customer success is, again, a self-professed, easily bored individual, is it's very nascent. You've got 100 years of sales playbooks that we're still building off of. Customer success really is, 10, 20 years old at the most. So we don't have a playbook for multi-product, distinct customer success. And you can make valid cases for one CSM cross-training. You could make a case for, if I've got 7 products, I need 7 CSMs and some Uber CSM at the top of the pyramid who's kind of this account manager. So my point of view on that, in just kind of the 2 examples, for these enterprise types, for me, it's about wallet share and it's about lifetime value of the customer. Which means it's not about how much it closed for. And that sort of necessitates a need for for good wallet sharing and some sort of, customer tiering that goes beyond just just what it happened to sell for. Because again, there's an ROI, right? And let's say the salesperson sold, for $25,000, whatever your widget is, and they sold it on an ROI of $75,000, over with a break even of 3 years or something. But we know that there's $1 million opportunity and $3 million of ROI. It's incumbent upon some individual to convince or bring the customer along on that multi-year journey. And that's just not going to be there with your other example was, well, these guys are complex, but the wallet share isn't there. I mean, those are your most expensive customers, but not necessarily your most profitable. So that wouldn't be where I would be spending my enterprise resources.
Yeah, what's interesting, and we talked to this other guest that Artie was mentioning, is that, a lot of times until they put a quota on the customer success portion of the business, that way, like, they're always going to be kind of this, I guess, secondhand is a bad way of saying it, but they're not going to get the seat at the table as much as sales does and some of the others, right? Because there's no revenue tied to it specifically. So his point was saying, tie revenue to it somehow, figure out a way, like you're saying, grow that from 75,000 ARR to a $3 million ARR, because there's greenfields, and how do you track that and measure that for that team?
Totally. Yeah. And there's still an outdated, I'm sure you guys hear this a lot, of customer success as a cost center, which is that idea of just an adjunct of support, really, as opposed to, I think of it like an investment, right? The sales is my principal, but very different, 5% versus 15% in terms of, what investment vehicle. And customer success has the ability to change that investment thesis for the principal of your customers. But one of the things I'm becoming more interested in, or starting to explore a little bit, is the concept of a pod system, where you may have some, you talk about archetypes as opposed to maybe titles, but you have sales oriented, you have product oriented, maybe an onboarding piece, an SDR concept, and then someone who's running more strategically. Different organizations can staff it differently depending on where they're weak or where they need to grow. But then there's a shared quota rather than, an AE with 500,000 and a CSM that's like has this nebulous service goal. Everybody has a $3 million quota over 3 years or something, and you all share a little bit in it, but have mutual respect for the strengths that you all bring to this whole.
Yeah, I like that idea. And it gets it away from the polarizing effect of contacting as a customer, contacting a brand, and one person you're talking to is trying to sell you stuff. The other person's trying to save you. The other person's trying to be your buddy and help you with all the product bugs and issues and new features. So you always get this like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde when you're talking to the brand, and you're not getting this cohesive experience because not to talk to that person because all they're going to do is want to drive whatever metric that they're focused on at that moment. So having a pod and having that synergy and having a pod based group of KPIs to go after is an amazing idea. I haven't seen it successfully done, but I love the concept. I love the strategy, and would love to see a company really do it well.
Yeah, and we've all either participated in, on one end or the other, that awkward business review where like you have the stuff that everybody came for, and then you all pause, and now the salesperson does their thing where they talk about the stuff that they care about. And I think, a lot of what we're seeing is, especially with PLG, is the change from a one-way sales cycle to this unidirectional or this flywheel sales cycle, where the role of customer success, like if I sell one account at oracle.com and now Oracle's a customer, who owns upsell in Oracle? Is this a customer success function? Is this still a sales function? At what point does it change? And there's all these hybrid models that are going to bring these questions. And how do we incentivize sales? Like, is closing, did you just close Oracle? Should we have a huge party? Or, are we trying to create some groundswell of support within this huge company? And are sales best suited for that sort of function? And I think there's some interesting things to be done with quota, and not less, because if you pay a salesperson on maximizing the single transactional event, they're going to do that regardless of whether it's best for the lifetime value of the customer.
Yep. And there's land grabbing too. If everyone has the ability to upsell, cross sell, and they get a little piece of it, and it makes them look better internally for promotions or raises, everyone's going to be fighting over it. And that's going to be a really interesting Shark Tank experience for the customer.
Yeah, which the customer can, to keep with the shark analogy, they can smell that's kind of happening, that these guys don't really have my best interests at
right.
heart.
They can smell the sales breath, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I want to switch back to a little bit. We talked about maybe 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, about just more tech and more AI coming into play. How do you see that transforming what you guys are doing and utilizing some of that for your organization?
Yeah, I think it is super cool. I've been sort of a AI junkie over the last few months, trying to just, one thing, like a great example is the idea of a customer health score. Like I have been in the exercise of creating customer health score, and it is a nightmare. And I've never talked to anybody who's done it successfully. You have this 2-hour meeting, and everybody says, well, we need support. And we also need, well, if they go out of business, that's bad. So we need that. If the executive never talks to us, we should probably have that in the health score, and NPS. And then if they pay on time, and a few other things, or if they have a ton of support tickets, that's probably bad. If they have no support tickets, that might be bad too. And if they have, then there's this user trend thing that we try to get in. So you smash all those together. By then you're 2 hours into the meeting. You sort of say, well, should we just give everything 20% and then call it a day? And they say, yeah. And then somebody realizes that we don't know how to get users, because we don't have the right product to aggregate it across all of our user mapping. Or what do we even, how do we quantify executives haven't talked to us over the last, 3 weeks? What is that, a true false? So anyway, this is, lots of people have this version of the conversation. So you have this messy sort of deprecated health score that now you're trying to manage to. And of course you have false positives. And then eventually companies say, this doesn't meet reality anymore. So nobody looks at the health scoring anymore, etc. So anyway, all this long preamble to say that the idea that an AI can take these information, can mine every interaction for a frustration score or a delight quotient, or customers are angry and it's because of your UI, but it's in this tier, it's this way, and in this tier, it's not. You'd never be able to figure that out through feedback, subjective feedback from support reps or CSMs. And to use some regression analysis to show trending of engagement and NPS and usage. And then to have a model, this is like, Blade Runner sort of future state, but to have a model of, here's how awesome companies look. You look kind of like that, but you have this dip. And so if you did these actions, and it's all, automated, you could bring the dip here, you could raise the value a little bit, and that may be worth historically, 4% negative churn or something like that. And there's a lot of companies right now, and they're all kind of talking about these concepts, whether it is like a smart KPI or a frustration score or an automated health score, that I don't think is going to, eat customer success. I just think it's going to make us, you're not like product always says, why should I believe you? You're one data point. Can you prove that customers are really talking about this? To be able to say, yeah, they talked about it 500 times last week. Across these, 10 different data sources, and they're super frustrated when they talk about it. That's super powerful. It's just going to help customer success really be the voice of the customer, I think.
Yeah. I think you hit it right on the head. Customer health score. We've had it come up a couple times on the podcast. No one's solved for it. And I love the analogy. It's like a doctor. If you're a doctor and you've got a bunch of patients and you have to score someone on a health scale, 1 to 100, I don't know. Are they 50? Are they 80? I don't know. There's so many factors, and there's factors you don't even know about because they may not be visiting you as much as they should be. They may not be taking the medication that you're prescribing. You don't know if they're smoking and not telling you, all these types of things.
Yeah.
Same thing with our customers. What I heard, which was a really good, sticking with that analogy, is a really good way to think about it as, instead of trying to measure a health score and pinpointing it to a number 1 through 100, instead think about using technology and AI for the cause and effect and the potential cause and effect. So, prescribing aspirin to 100 of your patients, will it solve 99% of the headaches or of those 100 patients, or whatever the percentage is? And AI can be used to give you those potential outcomes without actually doing an A/B test. Looking at historical models, looking at future models to see with all these KPIs and metrics. So I think AI is going to get there. It's going to be tough, but it'll never be as good as a CSM or an account manager really just being plugged in, understanding what's going on in the moment, and then coming back with some sort of an assessment.
Yeah, and it should never be that. It should be, it's the genetic testing to keep, your genome map for the doctor. If with the rise of genetic mapping, suddenly there's all these other things or these new things. Did you know you have a 5% chance of, whatever, lung cancer, but even though you don't ever smoke? Well, that's where AI, I think, can come in on the customer's end and say, did you know that your customers hate the way your database is laid out, or the way this Salesforce, Amazon implementation, they're really upset about that? You would have never even thought to ask that question. So your CSMs are always going to be this high empath, trusted advisor who help the customer through, but they can kind of have this daily headlines. These are what customers care about, and it's just going to help them be that much more impactful.
Yeah, what's great for organizations that are already using technology in other areas, if they're recording calls, they have their emails and all the different correspondence, is that AI can go and use all that back data to quickly build a model based off of, well, here's what's been happening the last 5 years. And you can, whereas a company that doesn't have that technology in place, they have to start from scratch and then wait till it builds on itself so the machine can actually learn. And then, another guest probably months ago was talking about, it was how AI is like an employee. You have to train it, you have to feed it, you have to treat it just like an employee so that it starts learning the things you want it to learn and getting what you want out of it. It's not just a plug and play type of solution.
Totally. Yeah, it's you can't just turn it on and suddenly it knows everything. And you have to know what you're trying to have it, not only give it the right, information, but also ask the right questions.
Yep. And that's half the battle, right? I mean, I think someone in your standing where you've had experience in all these other departments, you have a much better understanding of what questions to ask. You have the revenue mindset, the sales mindset. I think a lot of CX leaders that we talk to, they've only been in one support service type department, and they don't have the full overarching view. And that's where we see the executives that when it comes from the top, it's great. Someone that's overseeing the whole organization from a success standpoint has a much better view and can conceptualize what questions to ask because they're able to see it from a 10,000 foot view.
Yeah. And I think that's where, the idea of, at the end of the day, you want to provide excellent service. But if you look at AI and if you're only asking, how does this correlate with my response times or my customer satisfaction? You're not getting the full picture, as opposed to how does this correlate with growth, with buying signals, with customers becoming champions and becoming references to really drive the growth of the business, is that kind of next level.
Well, it's been a great show so far, and I know we're running a little bit short on time, but we always like to ask our guests one kind of final question. We're all consumers. We're on the customer side of all of these amazing brands that are out there. Justin, when was the last time you had a great experience, maybe a memorable, positive experience? And if so, what was it and what made it great? Maybe it started sour or not so great and turned into a great experience after they fixed an issue. And if you don't have an example, maybe Alex and I can jump in and we'll try to think of one before we end.
Let's see. Would be a great service experience.
Yeah.
Yep. Whether it's with a brand or maybe even just a vendor that you use and you submitted a ticket and they responded quickly, pretty much anything.
Yeah, I had a surprisingly good experience with my mortgage company recently. You always expect you're going to wait, 20 minutes on those things. And then the person, I had sort of a complex question around multiple payments where I had this automated billing where I was paying the wrong mortgage 2 months in a row. Not my best moment. But and one of those where you expect to be transferred to some upper department and then get hung up on, and then you go back in the queue. But none of that happened. So I got to an operator, only had to say operator once, got right to somebody. They were able to close the loop in a single call. I was actually at Pavilion is doing their CCO school, and that is the number one desire of customers is a single call resolution, or the most deleterious is taking multiple calls to resolve an issue. So it was true, having everything taken care of. I had one call, 10 minutes. It was great.
I love that example because mortgages are always, there's never really a wow factor when you talk to a mortgage. It's not like oh cool, you just saved me more money, or it's just very turnkey. It's almost like a complicated password reset. You have a simple request and it becomes a change. But I've never heard of a story, and this is the first time I've heard of it, of having to escalate to the next tier because of the wrong auto pay, or it's paying off the wrong loan or whatever that is. So it's great to hear that they have those tier 2, tier 3s, because I've never gotten that high.
Yeah, I think I came in with extremely low expectations, which also helped.
It's like calling the cable company, extremely low expectations. Well, Justin, man, it's been great having you on, and what great insight you brought to the show today. Thank you so much for joining us and just taking the time out of your day.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Justin, and thanks, Alex, for being the co-host today.
You got it. Thanks,
you
guys. Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.